Hi, Lauren. How are you?
Hi, Siddharth. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm great, hey? I was actually quite fascinated by when you had sent me a message on WhatsApp recently. Tell me about the IEC Political Party Funding Symposium.
Yes. So that was interesting. That was something I attended in Durban, actually. I should have phoned you when I was there, then we could have met. Anyway,
Yeah.
I was in Durban for a few
Uh-huh.
days. It was an
Mhm.
IEC symposium on political party funding. And interesting, I mean, I'd love to know from your viewers, please comment. Do you know how political parties are funded? In South Africa, they are funded both by the government itself and also by the private sector, meaning individuals and businesses can donate to political parties. There are limits, like in a year, no one can or no entity can donate more than 15 million rand. Political
Wow.
parties are expensive and they do not have to
Hmm.
be this expensive. But anyway, we discussed the symposium was all culminating to the point where they basically say they're going to put together all of the proposals and put forward suggestions to Parliament when it comes to re-looking at the Political Party Funding Act. So since I think it was 2021, political parties now had to submit audited statements to Parliament so that it becomes transparent. If you get more than 100,000 Rand as a political party from either a single entity, a single person, or a business, you have to declare that, and the person or entity donating also has to declare it. And all that information can be found on the IEC website. So I actually think that is a great step forward. I think the threshold for disclosure could probably lower. So I think like if a party gets 25,000 Rand or more, it should be declared because that'll foster a better democratic climate where there's more transparency. Anyway, the minister, Enoch Godongwana, he came to give a speech on the final day of the symposium, first thing in the morning. And that was the most interesting finding because at the end of the speech, he declared that what they are working towards is political parties becoming fully funded by the government. Now, what does that mean? It means that political parties will not be able to accept donations from the private sector, which makes it near impossible for unrepresented parties, in other words, parties that don't have seats, to now fund themselves. How are they going to get to the point where they can compete with established parties? And it's going to be impossible. But the worst implication, the fact that he's saying that they're working in a step-by-step process to reach the point where parties are fully funded, it means it's going to come out of our money, basically, the taxpayer funds. We already spend a lot of money. Our taxpayer money is, I think, 600,000 a year. Not
Wow.
exactly sure on the exact amount that goes towards political parties. You can go look at My Vote Counts, their website. They actually break it down very beautifully. But 600,000 Rand goes to political parties. Now, people, this is not including the salaries of members of parliament. This does not include the salaries for your councillors. This is money that goes to the party itself to run its daily operations and spend money on campaigning or marketing or whatever it is. And obviously the ANC, being the ruling party, gets the lion's share of that allocation, and the DA next in line, they get a ridiculous amount of money from the government. So to me, that brings up two issues. Firstly, why is it so expensive for political parties to campaign? Surely if they're doing their job right, and if there are other regulations in place, for instance, media giving fair coverage to all parties, if they're doing their job right, then they shouldn't need as much. I think that if people knew how much political parties spend on posters alone, I think this country would go crazy. I think the average voter would go crazy. We run OM as a party, we contest elections, and we've only ever managed to have at most in an election, last elections, I think we had, I stand to be corrected, but I think we had 2,000 posters. It was by far our biggest budget. I can't remember what we spent, but parties have much more than us, hundreds of thousands of posters, the established parties. And they are spending tons. So if you can imagine if they have 300,000 posters and each poster is 100 Rand, you can imagine how much money that costs. And so we have something really wrong in our political system, that it costs this amount of money for parties to campaign, that the Minister of Finance wants to put all of that on the taxpayer, the whole burden on the taxpayer, because he left the speech. He left us with a question. He actually left us with 2 questions. He said, I'll leave you with 2 questions. The one was about the IEC's role in oversight of political party funding, but the main question is, how much does a party require to campaign in the elections? He's basically putting in the hands of the voters, we must come up with a number kind of thing. Like, it's expensive. We need this money. And I think that's absolutely a slap in the face of every voter and citizen of South Africa, because let's not forget how few people actually vote. Our last 2024 elections had the worst voter turnout in our entire history, in our very short democracy. And he's basically saying that we must fit the bill. People who are disillusioned with the system, people who are refusing to vote, it doesn't matter. If you're a taxpayer, you must fit the bill for funding political parties. And I think it's absolutely authoritarian, communist, and disgusting. And we cannot let that happen. And I'm curious to see how this bill is going to be, or this current regulation is going to be reshaped in the near future.
Wow, that's pretty hectic, eh? So, okay, I'm gonna get to the main questions now. First regarding South Africa, and then I'll get to the US later on. So, our first question to you now is regarding the floods that happened in June and climate resilience. So, in light of the devastating June floods in Eastern Cape, resulting in over 100 deaths and widespread displacement, how should organic humanity movement advocate for stronger climate adaptation policies and disaster?
I wouldn't put it in the box of climate adaptation. This is an issue that is recurring in South Africa continuously, and it's not unique to South Africa. It happens all over the world. And it's lack of foresight and lack of service delivery on part of the government. So one has to take a multifaceted approach. Remember, the organic humanity movement, we exist for one reason only: to change the system and to put in place a brand new system. So the way we see local government, completely different to how local government is. The role we see for national government is also completely different, and we don't believe in provincial government, of course. So when it comes to disaster management, that is one of the biggest problems that we have. It's disaster management. It's disaster response. After something has happened, then the government comes in and fixes, or tries to attempt to fix, whatever's gone wrong. And that's one of the biggest failures. One needs a multi-layered approach in that national government, we believe, should be in charge of 3 things: the justice system, national security, so defending our borders and growing our military, etc., and then also the oversight of infrastructure and resources, including natural resources. And in that portfolio at national level, one would look at spatial planning. And when it comes to this kind of thing, national government actually needs to sit down and talk to earth scientists and climatologists and actually see what's in this country. Where should we not be building? Where should we not be putting up developments? Because also in Cape Town, it's something that happens a lot. Close to Hout Bay, an informal settlement sees fires almost every single year. People are displaced by fires. And it's just because of the location of the environment, where it is. There's a lot of forest. It gets really hot in summer. It's very easy for fires to start. It happens every year without fail. In Cape Town as well, there are lots of areas that are literally built in flood zones. And now the problem is the relationship between property developers and politicians is very toxic for the people, because it's all about profiteering and power. That's a combination, that's a marriage we don't want to see, where property developers use political power or influence to develop for profit, not taking anything in mind. How is it going to affect the residents and voters down the line? Don't care at all. So in the case of the Eastern Cape, I mean, it's already happened. It happened. If I recall, it also happened last year. It's going to keep happening. So on one hand, you have the spatial planning, but okay, fine. You can identify areas where buildings should not have been erected. But now what? There are already homes and people living there. So it's going to be up to local government. In our vision, we see local government having a lot more power and a bigger mandate than national government. So we believe in a proper devolution of power and a proper decentralization. So South Africa is only decentralized on paper. So you have national, provincial, and local governments. So technically, they can theoretically say we decentralized, but at the end of the day, most decisions still end up at national government level. And that leaves and renders most local governments powerless to effect the changes necessary to improve the lives of residents. So there are places all over the country where homes literally just shouldn't be. Homes have been built up there for various reasons, profiteering property developers or informal settlements where people had no choice but to occupy land that was available, and that land happens to be in flood zones. So what we're seeing is an absolute highlight of the worst effects of the housing crisis. And I don't see the current system being able to fix that anytime soon, especially with regards to how the current system works alongside the economic system in driving people to city centers. And because people are driven towards city centers, government really only focuses on development of housing projects in those metros and cities and completely ignores development in local areas where there's smaller populations. And that's actually what we need to see. We need to see more economic development, growth, and then also more housing being accommodated in more outlying areas so that entire populations aren't densified in cities like the United Nations Agenda 21 suggests.
Okay, on my second question, which is now about affordable housing amid budget disputes. For the 2025 budget, postponed VAT increase and continued high youth unemployment, what measures does Organic Humanity Movement propose to relieve economic burdens to young youth, South Africans?
Well, our government knows nothing about economics. They don't even know high school level economics. And this is one of the biggest problems because the policies that the ANC puts forward, as well as some of the other parties, are quite the opposite of what is healthy for a free market and healthy economy. And Enoch Godongwana, the Minister of Finance, he was at the IEC symposium, like I said. And he started off his speech trying to be very charismatic, saying he studied economics in university back in the day when he was young. And he said, but he never practiced. He was bragging. He was like, I never practiced economics. And all I could think was, yeah, it shows. It shows that you never practiced. But unfortunately, I mean, with the many laws, and I think you have some of them covered in the questions coming up, the government makes decisions that scares away investors. The government makes decisions that make it difficult for smaller to medium-sized businesses prosper. And because of that, because government stands in the way of economic prosperity in general, that's why youth are being affected. Never mind the fact that the education system doesn't prepare our children for surviving adult life at all. So there's a two-pronged approach. You, as a government, get out of the way of economics, number one. And number two, you completely transform the economic system. So you prepare people not just to be employable, but to be entrepreneurial. That would be the most important thing. I would love to change the education system with immediate effect. It is a horrible, horrible education system. I say that with experience, having children of my own that are school going. They are actually homeschooled. And I mean, we look at the CAPS. We actually looked at the CAPS curriculum again this morning to see how we can supplement, because we draw from various sources for their curriculum. And again, I was just shocked. With the resources one has available, there are way better curriculums out there that the government won't adopt, obviously. But I think what happens is that youth are not ready at all. By the time they matriculate, say they pass grade 10, grade 11, grade 12, they are not prepared for the real world. They're not prepared for survival, and they're not prepared to have a wealth mindset or to know anything about creating something of value for society. I think we are conditioned. I think it started even when I was at school. We're conditioned to go to university. And basically, what does that mean? You're conditioned to be a customer. Now, most people might not be privileged to go to university. Those that are often end up in student debt and might not even use their degree later down the line. So we have a very toxic system, economic system, or the way government interacts with economics. But then we also have a very toxic education system. So when it comes to youth unemployment, there are no quick fixes. We have deep systematic issues that come from many, many years ago. And to change that needs radical system change. That's what we're on about. That's why we want as many members as possible. With enough numbers, we can organize better, mobilize, and then make the changes necessary in government. But until people actually get on board and are willing to act, we will always be stuck in these oppressive systems. They will always be suffering. And the worst part is that the average person looks to the government to solve the problem when the government caused the problem to begin with.
Yeah. Okay. My third question is now about expropriation and land reform. Okay, the controversial Expropriation Act and its legal challenges heightened by the DA lawsuit and Trump-Ramaphosa Oval Office tensions about white farmers have drawn global scrutiny. How does organic humanity movement navigate property rights, equity, and social cohesion?
Well, I feel like property rights are very important. That's one of the way we see it, a hallmark of freedom, private property rights. That's a starting point. It's a starting point to wealth building as well. Once someone has a piece of land, whatever it is, whatever shape or form, however big, it's a starting point. You can build a home, you can have a family, you can grow food, you can harvest water. So you can have the very basic needs for survival. And I'm not talking the kind of land in the middle of a city where there's not enough space to do anything. I'm talking about land. So in principle, as difficult as it is to apply to an entire population, people should have access to land ownership. The fact that the government is tying race to it is ridiculous when we are dealing with a population of 60 million. I think it's important that property ownership rights are protected. And I think the US honestly is rather opportunistic. I don't see necessarily the act as an act of goodwill. But yeah, private property rights is something that we will always say is the hallmark of freedom. And it's a starting point for every human being. Land is a very, very deeply important issue in any country. And what we need to do is see how we can help more people access land, more people that need it. And even when it comes to youth, I mean, we've thought of very many different avenues one can take with regards to giving access to land ownership to people who would not otherwise afford it. And there are definitely options that one can try. But unfortunately, there isn't any will by the government to do so. And that is probably the root cause of what we see. Land can eradicate poverty. I remember Jacob Zuma said that one day when he was still the president. And I remember the presenters, radio presenters, laughing their heads off. He says, our people don't need jobs, they need land. And land is the heart of all issues. It's the heart of wealth creation. It's the heart of freedom. And that's something that we take very seriously.
Okay, now on to diversity law and foreign investment. The DA's legal challenge to the Employment Equity Amendment Act raises concerns over investor confidence versus redressing apartheid-era disparities. Where does organic humanity movement stand on balancing transformation and economic growth?
Well, it's actually simple. I mean, we're not here to put together policies. That's why the system needs to change. Government has way too much power. And like I said earlier, the people in our government, all parties that are there, because remember, there are numerous seats. We've got the GNU now, which is a new thing in our country. I don't think they necessarily understand economics. And this is not unique. And it's not just economics that politicians don't understand. I think there are some basic subjects all politicians, especially public representatives and decision makers, should know. Economics is one of them, and basic science as well, as with your first question regarding the floods and climate change and everything. So unfortunately, anyone can be elected to public office, and that's democratic. If you look at a democratic principle, absolutely, anyone should be elected to public office. But once they're in public office, there should be some basic course that they do to help them understand, help our public representatives, our dear people we vote for, understand basic things, basic science, basic economics, so that they can make better decisions. But unfortunately, we are a country where politics is dictated by ideology, but ideology does not feed people. Ideology does not solve problems. And as long as we have ideology reigning supreme, then our economic system will always be in a state of disrepair. We are not growing economically, and it's an absolute crisis. And I don't know what the next 5 years are going to look like with the current government ideology in place, one which is contrary, an ideology which is contrary to economic prosperity.
Yeah, you've kind of led me on to my next question now, which is about the impact of the 2024 to 2025 coalition government, with the fragile unity government making policy gains on load shedding and retirement savings, but still struggling to translate momentum into improved living standards. What is Organic Humanity Movement's strategy for pushing for meaningful socio-economic reforms?
Same answers as before. Government needs to get out of the economy's way, and the government needs to get out of people's way. The GNU is a very fascinating beast, as I call it. So a lot of people that I've seen comments on social media, a lot of people I've spoken to in person, not everyone, but a lot of people do feel very hopeful, or did feel very hopeful about the formation of the GNU, because they thought, finally, we have all these parties working together. But you must remember one thing. Those parties are all there working together. They often, I think, butt heads. But when they do work together, they work together to maintain power. They do not work together for the benefit of the people. And that is something that is shocking. It is, again, testament to the fact that the system has to change. The Organic Humanity Movement proposes getting rid of the official recognition of political parties. And so what does that mean? You'll vote for the president directly. You'll vote for all your other representatives directly as well. You'll vote out of a pool of candidates. You will vote for your geographical member of parliament. You'll vote for your mayor. You'll vote for your councillors. There won't be a political party on the ballot. Posters will not have party logos. It'll be about the person you're voting into public office. Now, obviously, we can't disband all organizations, political organizations. They will still exist, but they will have no funding from government, no recognition by government, and they'll have nothing to do with the electoral process. And I think that's definitely a step in the right direction towards a truer form of democracy in this country. It's imperative that the system gets changed as soon as possible, because we're just going to be stuck in this perpetual cycle of doom as long as the system stays the way it is. A lot of people feel like, what's the point of putting in a new system? Surely we just need better people, but that's not the case. Once you're stuck in the system the way it is, you get trapped in it along with all its internal processes and its internal culture, and it completely stunts progress. So it's highly important that as soon as possible, we change the Electoral Act and the political system of South Africa. And you can also read our manifesto. It's on our website. We propose a different government structure as well. And with all those things working together, South Africa will finally be on the right track, but that will only be the beginning of solving all its very many complicated problems.
All right, let's get to the USA side of things. Okay, which is about the first question regarding the US side of things is about the big, beautiful bill and social safety nets. The Trump-backed tax and spending one big, beautiful bill proposes deep cuts to Medicaid and social programs, facing fierce opposition in Congress. How can Organic Humanity Movement advocate for protecting vulnerable communities and resisting harmful fiscal austerity?
Well, that's a difficult one. I mean, this is one of the problems, is that it shouldn't be up to government to solve every problem. We have a societal problem, actually. And the problem is we have recognized that there are deficiencies in our society, and then we give our power over to government to solve those problems. But then government takes that power and they don't solve our problems, they create more problems. And the more problems emerge, the more laws they create. The more laws they create, the more problems there are. And it's this vicious cycle. So we really feel like if you follow our manifesto and really internalizes the changes we want to implement, national and local governments, and then if you have to also keep in mind the levels of government that we have put in place, we even consider the individual as a level of government. So there's this air of recognition of self-government that exists. We even consider the family unit to be almost a form of government as well, before you even get to local government and national government. So when you're looking at any problem, and we're going to be highlighting this in our local government manifesto coming up for 2026 elections, the local government has certain responsibilities. They might have a responsibility to deliver clean drinking water to your tap, right? But then as a citizen, you also have certain responsibilities, not to pollute water, not to throw nappies down toilets, for instance. Then civic society, like churches, schools, and NGOs also have certain responsibilities. And then the business sector also has certain responsibilities. Likewise, we envision a brand new constitution for South Africa. So take the constitution we have now. It's a great starting point. A lot of people think it's the freest constitution in the world. It doesn't say much about other countries' constitutions, but it's a starting point. And I really feel like we should have government limitations listed in the constitution, and we should have, most important of all, for a democracy to thrive, citizen responsibilities. And as government gets out of the way of economics, and then the economic system self-regulates itself if government steps out of the way, and then we start to see businesses flourishing, investment coming back, and all of the rest. We'll see more employment, better salaries, more cash flow for people to spend in the economy. Also, when government reduces tax, there's more cash flow in an economy. Simple. When all of that starts to come into play, what you can start to see then is civil society taking the lead and taking initiative and starting to fix the social ills that we see in our local communities. However, if government is continuously being the cause of all our problems, job loss, inflation, the forever rising cost of living, we are all in survival mode. And if we're all in survival mode, we can't help each other. We can't get involved in our community. We can't find the energy to go to a local ward meeting. We can't find the energy to go and participate in a public participation process. We can't find the energy to donate some of our time or money to a charitable cause because we are all in survival mode. So as soon as the government realizes that the people will be better off with it being reduced, the better.
Okay, this is regarding the ICE raids and civil unrest. The June federalization of the National Guard and Marines in LA as part of anti-deportation raids highlights a dramatic militarized response to immigration protests. What is Organic Humanity Movement's vision for humane immigration policy and civic safety?
Yeah, humane immigration policy is one thing, but humane treatment of our own citizens is top priority. And I think it's becoming more obvious, and there's more out there on the effects and the strain on resources of the immigration crisis we have in South Africa. So remember what I said at the beginning about how national government has three main areas: justice system, oversight of infrastructure and resources, and then national security, protecting our borders. So that needs to get a lot more strict. I definitely believe that. We really need to make sure that we look after the interests of South Africans first. Until we are okay, there's not much we can do to help people from other countries. So you got legal immigration in South Africa, then you got illegal immigration, and those are obviously two very separate things. As for what America is doing, I'm not going to comment. They can sort themselves out. I think we as a nation, if we can become a nation, a united nation, we can really be leaders in the world on how to tackle these kinds of issues, especially as we lead into the fourth industrial revolution. We can be the true example of what life can look like without bowing down to globalist interests. So I think one obviously has to be humane in how a government goes about doing things like dealing with immigration, but at the same time we have to be realistic and say, first job of a national government is to protect the borders, strengthen the military, and ensure there's no international threats, so that the people inside the country can live in peace and prosperity. That's the ideal we need to work towards, at least. So that's our vision on national government's responsibility, and I don't think our government is very much taking that responsibility seriously.
Okay, regarding the political violence and state legislators, with threats and even shootings targeting young lawmakers, like in Minnesota, raising alarms over democratic stability, what steps should Organic Humanity Movement support to strengthen protections for elected officials and preserve institutional integrity?
I mean, one can think about and argue whether getting rid of the power that political parties have would fix something like that. We know that there have been, in the past, public representatives that have been killed, whether it was for political power purposes or what, is up for debate. I won't comment on that. But I think in any country that considers itself a democracy, and America is not a democracy, by the way, it's never declared itself to be one. It's a republic. But I like to think that one would want to employ democratic principles no matter what kind of country you have, if you care about people. I think one of the most important things that we can do as citizens is be more involved in civic action. And I don't think we are involved enough. I think our apathy, our complacency is one of the biggest problems. And it leaves a void. It leaves a void for the criminal elements and the worst of society to get involved in politics. So it's up to us to change that and to get involved in our system. I think in South Africa, we probably have unique problems within our political system, but nothing that can't be undone or fixed.
All right, now we get into the third-party political movement. Elon Musk's vow to launch an America Party underscores growing dissatisfaction with binary politics. What lessons can organic humanity movement share on building principled grassroots civic movements beyond the bipartisan duopoly, whether in the US or elsewhere?
I wonder if US is not too far gone. I mean, you would have thought they would have started something like this long time ago. The two-party state, and that's something that's very important to stress, is that with our changes we propose, we cannot fall into a two-party state disaster. I think with the GNU, it's almost gone towards a more of a two-party state dynamic than anything else. Because do you ever hear about other parties when it comes to discussions in the news about GNU? You don't. You hear about the ANC and the DA pretty much only. And so, I think it's interesting. Watching the fallout between the president and Elon Musk was also fascinating. It just proves that everyone has different ideas on how to lead, and people are not going to agree. Here in South Africa, we have so many different political parties available to us, but unfortunately, we don't know most of them for various reasons. One of the reasons is because of the inequality that the system perpetuates between unrepresented parties that are new and don't have seats, versus established parties that do have seats because they've been around since apartheid time and have been funded by the government since apartheid time. How on earth do you compete with that? And that's one of our biggest challenges, but we're doing our best and we're doing okay, and we hope for just more growth overall so that we can overcome those challenges. So I don't know what the two-party state is going to look like. Not the two-party state, sorry, the new party that Elon's started. I don't know what that's going to look like in America. I feel sorry for America. Maybe we'll be taking American refugees in the future. Maybe they can come live here because things are so bad that side. I don't know. But I think, sometimes when one looks at global politics, it looks like the rest of the world is really falling apart. Whereas South Africa, since our colonial legacy and all the rest, since apartheid ended and everything, before then, we have collectively had to suffer and put up with a lot of things. Bad government decisions, segregation from before, just permanent oppression, difficulty, crime, corruption. It's endless. You can go on forever listing all the problems that we have in South Africa. So we have become, I think, a very robust, very, very resilient nation. And while the rest of the world is crumbling, we're starting to find our feet. And I think as the rest of the world, as their systems crumble, we will start building a new one. And we, here in the Southern Hemisphere, here in South Africa, will become the new global leaders of the next century. That's at least my hope and vision for South Africa.
Okay, my final question to you now is about media, power, and accountability. The $16 million Trump Paramount settlement over the 60 Minutes lawsuit has sparked warnings about press intimidation. How can organic humanity movement champion media freedom and counter the encroachment of influence and disinformation?
Oh, well, our media is already so captured. Our mainstream media is so captured. SABC is one of the worst. Absolute revolting. They don't have spines, no moral fiber. They are there only to serve those in power. And so we've already suffered with media. I don't know how bad it is in other countries. I'm pretty sure there are similar issues everywhere. I would guesstimate. But here in South Africa, it's absolutely clear how captured mainstream media is. And it's not just an observation as a citizen, but as a leader of a political party, seeing how excruciatingly difficult it is to get mainstream media coverage. Unless you're paying for an ad, it is near impossible. In fact, I'd say impossible. In 2024, I think we got 2 mainstream media journalists reporting on us as a new party. The rest absolutely ignored. I actually had the privilege, if I can say it like that, of meeting an SABC producer at the IEC symposium, and someone who knew her introduced me to her. And when I introduced myself and said I'm from an unrepresented, a new political party, she looked like she saw a ghost. She looked like she just wanted to get out of there and run a mile. And anyway, I said, well, if you have a slot, we'd love to give our input on what's happening, because they were interviewing represented parties. And then she looked like a deer in headlights. She looked terrified. She said, oh, just give me your number and I'll contact you when we have a slot for the unrepresented parties, like during the symposium. Did I hear from her? Absolutely not. But this is our experience time and time again. The mainstream media is nothing but a cog in the machinery of the state, propping up the power of the state and nothing else. Luckily, there are other journalists that are a little bit more open-minded, who aren't as bored, who have a little bit more freedom or feel like they have freedom, because I suppose their funding structure is different, that have given us airtime. And indeed, being on channels like yours, Siddharth, helps and goes a long way as well. And I am just very happy that we have influencers on YouTube, and we are in an age of information where almost everyone has access to technology. There's TikTok, there's YouTube Shorts, there's Facebook, there's Instagram. So the ability to reach people is better now more than any time. And I think in any country, I think anyone that has something important to say should make use of all the channels available.
All I gotta say is thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Siddharth.